Well, let me just tell you that anti-Asian hate crimes specifically and hate crimes in general have to be addressed in a very aggressive manner. An aggressive manner meaning that when a crime takes place, it needs to be dealt with and solved right away. But before a crime happens, I want to prevent the next crimes, which means that we need to have very serious public awareness, public education, and a sense of intolerance that is built in the community that says we will not accept this. You know, when this started, I was chairing the Congressional Black Caucus, and we immediately reached out to the Asian Pacific Islander Caucus, of which I'm an allied member, the Latino Caucus, the Native American Caucus, and all of our caucuses stood together and denounced this. And I'm happy to say that I was in Congress and able to participate in voting for a bill that denounced this and called for aggressive enforcement of anybody that commits a crime like this. It is a perfect example, though, of how leaders can create this, because the rise in anti-Asian violence completely coincided with President Trump's racism directed toward Asians by trying to escape his irresponsibility for handling COVID. And so he looked for a scapegoat and he blamed it on China, and then thereby blaming it on Asians. So he fomented that, and that was unacceptable.
Well, I'm proud to have served the LAPD for 15 years. I'm the only candidate running for mayor who understands the importance of public safety, because I actually wore a bulletproof vest, honorably pinned the LAPD badge, handled violent crime radio calls, handled variety of calls involving hate crimes. And I'm the only candidate who embraces the importance of public safety and putting public safety first, because if people don't feel safe, they're not going to live here, visit here, raise their families here, and do business here. And my public safety plan is push back against the whole notion of defunding the police. I was one of 2 no votes that voted to cut LAPD $150 million. In fact, one of my first actions as mayor is to refund the LAPD $150 million. Add to the ranks of the LAPD, because I can tell you, with more officers, more visibility on our streets, you'll expect to see a decline in crime. We're going to redeploy officers so they're on your streets, in your neighborhoods, foot beats, bicycle units, undercover officers dealing with the most the quality of life crimes that we're seeing taking shape in the city of Los Angeles. In addition, we're going to increase community-based policing programs that are proven models. I was once a senior lead officer working with relationships and quality of life issues in our neighborhoods. We're going to triple the size of the senior lead officer program. We're also going to expand on a program that we have modeled in Watts, the Community Safety Partnership Program, that works on trust and faith and confidence between the cops and the community. It's a proven model. We're going to take that citywide. And as it relates to the hate crimes in the AAPI community, you know, we had during COVID irresponsible comments that were made by our very own president. And what you're seeing was very hurtful and to the AAPI community. And I can tell you, as mayor, of zero tolerance in hate crimes from all corners of the city of Los Angeles. We are better than that. And I'm going to make sure that as your mayor, we'll have the appropriate staffing levels of our detectives so they can follow up and make sure these criminals are brought to justice. I can tell you, when 73% of the Asian American residents worry about being victims of physical violence or a hate crime, that hits home to me, because we are a city that's better than that. And as mayor, I'm going to prioritize your safety. I'm going to make sure that you feel safe, our businesses feel safe.
Good question. 20 years ago, Jim Hahn asked me to be the president of the LAPD. It was at a time where crime was spiking. The department was under a federal consent decree. It needed to be reformed. It needed new leadership, and officers were leaving. I came in as president, removed the existing leadership, hired Bill Bratton, put in a whole new team of leaders, hired more officers, reformed the department, turned the department back over to civilian control. The federal courts signed off on all the reforms I did, and we got crime down to levels of 1950. I've done it before. I will do it again. And you're absolutely right. Crime is out of control in the city of Los Angeles. And what's equally, if not more concerning, is the issue you raise on hate crimes and hate incidents, especially against the Asian community. It's up 100%. 100%. It cannot be tolerated. LAPD has to be well trained. The officers need to be on the street. We need to go back to community policing, which I brought in 20 years ago. Senior lead officers on the sidewalks, getting to know the residents, the merchants. The Asian community needs to be protected. And we need to have a policy, which I would have, of zero tolerance and absolutely arrest the criminals that do this and make sure they get prosecuted and hold them accountable.
I grew up in a neighborhood that had its fair share of violence. So I know what it feels like to feel unsafe. And I think the most important job of any mayor, any city in the country, but especially like a city like Los Angeles, is to make sure that all Angelinos just don't feel safe, but in fact are safe. And that our LAPD officers treat everybody, regardless of your zip code, with dignity and respect. Now, I can say this is that, a lot of folks can come forward and talk about hiring thousands of more police officers. But before we even had that conversation, we need to get our own house in order. And as mayor of the great city of Los Angeles, the first thing I have to do is make sure that we utilize in a much more effective and efficient manner our resources so we can maximize our dollars in such a way that we can focus on preventing as well as solving crimes. Two, I'd hire mental health specialists, which are so critical because I don't want our LAPD officers on the mental health front lines. I want them dealing, with crimes. I want them to be back on the line of duty. At any given moment, we can have LAPD officers dealing with someone who perhaps is half naked, having a psychotic breakdown, on any street in Los Angeles. I don't want them there because at that precise moment, there's someone who's a victim of gun violence, or there's a small mom and pop store or restaurant that has just been robbed, or a personal residential, neighborhood has just been burglarized. I want to utilize our officers in a much more effective manner, which is critical. I want to make sure that we professionalize our LAPD reserves so we can utilize them in a much more effective manner. I don't want to utilize our LAPD reserves to be putting orange cones and directing traffic when we have an event at LA Live or elsewhere. I want them on the streets, and whether that is dealing, for example, on Spring Street or Main Street, whether it is on Ventura Boulevard or Lancashire, whether it's on Melrose or our very own Chinatown or Koreatown, where we see a lot of AAPI hate taking place because of our Asian American communities throughout the great city of Los Angeles. I want to utilize our police officers in a much more effective manner where we see the trends and where we see the hot spots throughout the city of LA. The spike in crime, and we see the trends, are not unique to Los Angeles. They're happening throughout the state of California. They're happening throughout the country. But when you are a victim of a crime, it is something that feels very unique, very individualized, something that's deeply personal when you have been attacked, when you have been assaulted, when you have been robbed. And that's why we have to better utilize our resources in a much more effective manner. Listen, we can talk about, throwing numbers out there from 1,500 to 250. This is not a game of the Price is Right, where folks are just throwing out numbers without any data as to what demonstrates effective policing throughout the city of LA, but more effectively in Koreatown, in Chinatown, in Little Tokyo, in Thai Town, in Filipino Town, in Little Bangladeshi. These 5 community areas of API community members are the areas that I had the honor to represent when I was your leader of your California State Senate. And I've always stood strongly in solidarity, but the tensions have heightened even more so, and the racial crimes incredibly so. And we have seen such a huge exponential rise in hate crimes against our API community members but the majority of them are happening within the city limits of Los Angeles. That's why we have to be in high alert. And that's why we have a physical presence of our LAPD officers. And that's how we better utilize the current resources that we have today. If we're going to send a very clear message that API hate won't be tolerated, won't be accepted in the city of Angels. We know it's happening. And that's why as leader, you have to set the tone and culture. And if given the opportunity, I believe I'll be the first Latino Asian in the history of the city of LA to lead this great city. I know we tried at one time with then Councilmember Michael Wu, who attempted to become the first Chinese American, first Asian American to become leader of this great city. He came up short, obviously, but now this is another opportunity to make sure we have someone who understands what our API communities are going through every single day.
Let's talk about anti-Asian hate first. When the pandemic was first underway back almost 2 years ago, as you know, I was the first elected official here in Los Angeles to convene a town hall virtually focused on anti-Asian hate and how we combat it. Standing up for people in a community where I know that many people feel a sense of shame about conceding that they were victimized in the first place and might not be sure that officials would take them seriously and embrace them. I want to send the strong message that we want you to report if you are victimized. We want you, even if you think it wasn't a crime, but just a hate incident, if we can intervene at an early stage when there's an incident that isn't yet a prosecutable offense, we can make the community safer. And I want to send a strong message when I did this to perpetrators, as well as embracing the community of people who've been victimized, to perpetrators that there can be no place in our city for these acts of hate. Notwithstanding that our former president referred to the COVID pandemic as the Kung flu or Asian flu, we needed to combat that here. And as mayor, in addition to assuring we have resources to intervene when there have been incidents of hate, I want to be the mayor who stands up before such incidents occur and acts to prevent them by bringing our community together and by de-escalating division and hatred among people and focusing on what unifies us. It's a very important objective of mine, but I have strong views about the ways that we can help and create a community where there's no anti-Asian hate. I've been at so many rallies where we've spoken together and lifted each other up. On public safety generally, I'm the first candidate to have proposed that we increase the police force, in my case to 10,000. I want a well-trained and diverse police force where we de-escalate violent confrontation, where we sever from police obligations, interventions, and nonviolent mental health incidents and give those to crisis response teams instead. I want to assure that we embed officers in neighborhoods where there's often a lack of trust with police for 5-year stints to earn that trust. I want civilian ambassadors in police stations to be that first point of contact to make them user-friendly for people entering the station for the first time. And police can't do this alone, so I want to invest in violence prevention, intervention programs in communities. I want to clean up neighborhoods. Cleaning up a neighborhood makes them safer. I proposed 1 million more hours of neighborhood cleanup in the course of this campaign that I pledged to put in place. I want neighborhood solutions teams. So if that park or that store in a community is a source of problems, that we bring all the departments involved together to intervene and help resolve that problem. I want to include job training and after school programming as well. Safety for me is a comprehensive approach that hits on each of these cylinders, none of which is sufficient, but each of which is necessary.